G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza and this video is a part of a tutorial series where I'm going through and animating a Flash cartoon from start to finish, and this is part 3. So part 1 was where we prepared the file and got a bit of an animatic happening. Part 2 is where we created this background here, and in part 3 we're going to be turning these really rough kind of line sketches into characters. Now I've done 2 of them and I'm going to take you through and show you the finished product of each of the characters that I've done, so you can see how I've set them up before we get into creating the last one together. So we have here in the middle this character called Greg, a bit of a chubby, funny, nerdy kid who likes Minecraft, and this is what I ended up with. So as you can tell from the initial very sketchy sketch, we ended up with something very, very different. So this is a graphic symbol. Now the reason we're working with graphic symbols is because graphic symbols allow the clip to play in the main timeline. Movie clips don't do that. They only play when you render them, and they're more for like game development and multimedia stuff. So graphic symbols are most useful for animation. So going into this graphic symbol, now we haven't had any frames added to the timeline, and I took them away from the main timeline just for this Flash file, which you'll see in the reference files, for the purposes of basically just seeing exactly what we're working on rather than having too much to look at. Okay, so going into this graphic symbol, I'll go layer by layer. So on the bottom layer is the sketch. This is the refined version of the sketch I did. It's much more characterized than the scribbly one you saw outside, and I used this as the base to create the character. So the first thing I did was I drew the body, then I added the left arm and replicated that over the right arm. And these arms are graphics as well, so I can enter these and they have their own timeline. Whereas the body I haven't turned into a graphic just because I know I'm not going to be animating it. He's going to be standing still the whole time. So each character rig is slightly different. The backpack is also not in a graphic symbol or anything, just because that too won't be animated. And the head is a graphic symbol, and this has been laid out in a particular way. Now I'll go through this on this head and the other heads, but it's important that you know what style you animate with, because how you structure the face will very much affect how the facial animation happens. So this is how I structure the face. On the bottom layer I have the head base. I'm going to name these layers because I forgot to. I have the base of the head. This doesn't need to be a graphic or anything, but it's going to be locked, so nothing's going to be done to it. On the next layer I have my jaw. Now it's quite simply this. Okay, so inside this graphic are going to be different mouth shapes and things like that. So we'll call this mouth, and that layers with the head to create a more complete look. Above that I have the eyes, which is this, 2 eyes and a little porky nose. Above that I have the pupils, and then above that I have the brows. There we go. So that is what I use to create the head. Now, we're going to go a little into more detail in a later tutorial about how to prepare this for facial animation, but it's basically allowing me to separate the aspects of the head so that I can animate it later. So that is the Greg character. So coming over here, I'll show you this other character that I've done, who is Matt. And that's what this guy looks like. He's a little bit of a Kiwi. And so if I go inside this guy's rig, I'll go again from layer by layer. We have the sketch. So this is the sketch that I did, and I just kind of sketched until I was happy with what I had, and then I started to turn it into something that I wanted to use. So as usual, I started off with the torso. I usually start with the torso and go from there. The torso is kind of the central piece, and if you know where it's positioned, having everything fit nicely with the torso is the best way to go about it. You want the arm to look like it fits on the torso, the legs to look like they're part of the torso, and the head to look like they're part of the torso. The torso is the core. So from there, we have the legs, which poke out like this. They are both graphic clips because this guy's going to be animated walking at one point, which we'll go into in a later tutorial. We have the back arm. Now, with symbols like the arm, you'll notice that I've moved the pivot point to up here, this little thing here, that white dot, which allows me to, when I move or rotate it, to rotate it by that pivot point. And that's quite important. And I like to make sure that all my pivot point placements are done early. For example, if I go into this fat kid, you'll notice the pivot point on his hands are placed there. I'm not sure. Okay, so I didn't place the pivot point on his head, so I'll move that now. And you want to make it so it's in such a place that rotation is done without affecting other parts of the body or anything too much. There we go, so I'm happy with that. Back into this clip. So we've got his back arm, we've got his books and his front arm on top of that, again with the pivot point up there. And then we have the head, and the head has a carefully placed pivot point because he's got a bit of a weird shaped head. He doesn't have much of a jawline, and you'll notice that the head kind of cuts off like this, and that was done quite intentionally so that the rotation and the look of the head fits quite well. So the pivot point is quite back here on the neckline. There we go. So now let's go into the head and look how I structured these layers. On the bottom, I've got my head base. I'll name these again. On the next layer up, I've got my mouth. And let me just hide my head base so you can see exactly what that looks like. That's what that looks like. And that's a graphic, but the head base is not, so I'll lock that. Next layer above, I have the eyes, and while that includes the nose, it's mainly for the eyes, so I just call it the eyes. Next layer above that, I have the pupils. Next layer, and final layer, the brows. So you kind of pick the words that you use to name things. I call them brows, pupils, eyes, mouth, and it's just so that I have a common naming convention so that every time I draw a new character, I know what layers I'm looking for in terms of what things I'm up to. So that is how I've set up those characters. And now we have this character here on the right, which we're going to be doing. Now I have pre-prepared the sketch. Now this is the sketch of the character. This is the design, but it's not anything yet. And so we're going to take this sketch and turn it into a character rig ready to set up for animation. Now, my definition of what a character rig is, it's basically something that is the very fundamental basics ready to turn into something functional. So having everything named, layered, and structured in a way so that you can begin animating as soon as you finish your character rig. Now I tend to do facial animation first and then body animation, but with a finished character rig, you're ready to go ahead. So I'm going to select this whole graphic, I'm going to hit F8, and I'm going to call this character's name is Petey, so I'm going to call him Petey Full. So this is just my naming convention. Let me just take you through my folder. So I have a characters folder here in the library. So let's say Greg, for example. We have Greg Full, which is the full clip as I showed you. Inside there we have things like Greg Head, Greg Arm, all of those things. And then inside the head clip we have brows, eyes, all of that. And so that's the naming convention. So if I needed to edit something, I'll know that if I want to edit the facial animation, I can go inside Greg Head, and that's where I can access that. So naming conventions is pretty important. You really want to get used to having a functional strategy and setup in terms of how you approach your characters and your rigs. So I'm going to enter this graphic, and this is inside my PT Full rig. And I'm going to just add a bunch of layers and start creating this character. First things first, I'm going to turn this to a lighter color so that there's not too much clash with what I draw, and I'm going to lock that, and I'm going to start with the torso, as I mentioned before. So I'm going to zoom in, and now another thing to remember, let me just zoom out to reiterate this. Something to remember is if you're drawing with the brush tool isn't scalable as to where you zoom. So let me show you an example. I am zoomed out to 100% here, and I'm going to draw a squiggle. Okay. Now I'll zoom in once, draw another squiggle, zoom in another time, draw another squiggle. You can see quite clearly that the squiggle, the brush doesn't scale. It's not like Photoshop. If you have a 5 pixel brush in Photoshop and you zoom right out, it's 5 pixels, and if you zoom right in, it's 5 pixels. In Flash, it's very much just the size of the brush, and if you zoom in, it's going to be the same size, meaning you'll draw smaller when you're zoomed in. So what I do to prepare about working with this to make sure that all the characters have similar line weights is to remember the zoom. And so I say to myself when I begin that I set it, let's say it might be 600 if I want finer lines. In this case, it was 400. And so all of the aspects of these characters was drawn at 400. and at the second brush thickness, this one, which gives me a bit more control, at what's the word? A smoothing of 50. Okay. So the other thing I want to mention is if you want to draw details, you can zoom in and enlarge the brush size, and you just kind of need to know the rough convention for that. And basically I set it to, if I zoom in once, then I can just change the brush size up once. And that's basically it, maybe twice. Yeah, sorry, that's the way it should be. So if you zoom in once, bring up the brush size twice, because then it's double what it was. Okay, I'm crapping on a lot. Let's jump into it and draw the torso. So I've got my outline here, and I really don't need to spend too much time focusing on how it's going to turn out because I'm already happy with the result. I'm just solidifying it. So when I draw my torso, you kind of got to keep in mind that everything's going to be separated. So for example, rather than drawing into the head from the neck, I round it out and add kind of a stump, okay? So you kind of got to understand how the parts are going to flow into each other. That's how it's going to flow into the head, because the head's going to be on top and it's going to cover the stump, but you still need the color of the neck behind it. As for here, the front arm, I'm just going to have the back visible, so I'm not going to show anything to do with the arm. And it flows right into the bottom of the shirt, because I'm aware that the arm would just be placed on top. Mess with my line weights. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to tweak, this area of the body, and I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so that to me is a finished core. So I'm going to paint the neck, and I'm going to find a color that I want. So if I pick a color, I kind of want to look at the other ones and see what we've got going on and pick something appropriate based on that. So there's green and there's blue and black, and I kind of want to balance it out a little bit. Let's go with like an orange polo shirt. Now I have my brush set to paint behind, which allows me to draw on top of the brush strokes I've already drawn without going over it. In doing this, it allows me to outline the area that's going to be filled in and then paint it like that. It's quite simple. It's a really useful technique that I enjoy using. And let me just finalize this back area. And I'm done, and I'll pick a slightly lighter shade, paint that in. Okay, so I've got my orange polo shirt, paint in a couple of buttons. There we go. So I can select this, hit F8, and I'll call this, what's his name? Petey Torso. And that's a graphic now. So I've finished the torso, quite simple. I'll name this layer Torso, I'll name the first layer Sketch. It's good to keep with naming conventions, and I also like to be particularly organized when I know that you guys are going to have access to the reference files, simply because I know that I want it to be very simple and easy for you to understand. So I've turned on the wireframe and locked that layer, and now I'm going to build the body around it. So on the layer underneath the torso, I'm going to draw the legs. So I'm going to have the pants pop down. They're quite nerdy looking, these two. It's kind of a conversation between the semi-jock of their school and the two gamer nerds. Now, when I draw the other parts intertwining with each other, I always make sure to overextend a little bit. So as you can see, the torso ends there, but I've ended the pants up above. There are situations where I animate where I need that extra little bit of space because I add some movement which I didn't plan on. So it's better to be safe than sorry, just to make sure you have all your bases covered. Okay, so I've got my feet and my pants. Quite happy with that. Let's give him some gross pants. Let's give him some light khaki pants, like this. And we'll shade it like this. Let's see if that matches the colour. He looks a bit like a stay-at-home mum. Do I like it though? Let's see what it looks like going darker. No, maybe just more brown. So I'll change this to a desaturated brown. I think I prefer that. Okay, so now with the socks, I want to make them look a little bit like, ironically, sports socks. So just add a blue and a green line there. Make him look a little bit like a golfer, I suppose. There we go. And give him some dark shoes. Oops. There we go. Make sure they're filled in. Quite happy with that. So I've got my legs. I'm going to select this, hit F8, and I'll call this PT legs. There you go. You can see these as they appear in the library on the left. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to move the pivot point up here so that if I rotate the legs, it does so like that. And I'm going to just skew them back slightly to change his back weight. So like that, but just only a little bit. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to rename the layer, legs, lock, wireframe both of them. And then on the on the layer underneath the legs, because the back arm is always behind the legs, I'm going to draw the back arm. You don't need to have too much detail in the back arm, except for in clips where he appears in the front. So you want to have most of the detail there in case you need it, but you don't need to go over the top. So there we go. I'll fill it in. I need to change this line here to fit the body properly. Pretty happy with that. And then I'll paint that, and then I need to select my shirt color, so I'm going to eyedropper that dark area and then paint that in. So I've got my back arm. I'm going to turn it into a clip, and I'll call it PD back arm. I like to use it's called camel script, which is basically capitalizing the first letter of each word without spaces between them. Back arm, like that, and that allows you to kind of keep things all quite a bit more condensed, but easy to read at the same time. So I've got that done. I'll wireframe those. It's moving along pretty fast. I'll draw the front arm now. You'll notice I undo and redo the lines I draw quite a lot, which is very normal, especially in Flash because it's a vector-based brush. And that means that the brushes aren't exact. When you make your stroke, it does corrections and calculations to turn it into a bit more of a mathematical brush stroke, if that makes sense. So it's good to know what settings you like. I've done a tutorial on brush smoothness, so feel free to check that out. I'll paint that in, and I will paint in the arm. I'm fairly happy with that. Good. I'm going to select this arm, hit F8, PD front arm. It's a graphic. Hit enter. Now with both these arms, I should rename this layer front arm. Okay, with both these arms, I'm going to move the pivot point. Oh, I've already done that for the back one, so I'll just move this one up for the front one. Now, with the pivot point placement, you want to make sure it's placed in such a way so that rotation looks the best. So sometimes, see for instance, if I put it up there and I rotate the arm up here, that overlays there. So I might want to move the arm back and place the pivot point closer to there, which gives me a bit more movement. Let's move it down a little bit more. But that misshapes the back. So I think something like that, and moving the arm down a little bit more, and even going here and deleting some of this. So it's all about optimizing it for it to work as best as possible. That can also mean changing things like the torso so that it looks the best. And now when I rotate, I have a lot more movement, front and back, and it doesn't look very awkward when I move it. So I'm quite happy with how that's turning out. And now I'm up to the head, which is easily the most complicated part. Now I've got one layer too much, but that's okay. I'm going to wireframe these, and basically I'm going to draw... I'm not going to draw anything. I'm going to lock everything except for the sketch layer, use my lasso tool and select the head and hit copy. Then I'm going to lock the sketch layer, go up to my top layer and hit paste and move that in exactly the same position. I'm going to hit F8 and call this PD head. Hit enter. So now I've got my graphic, and it's quite editable from here. So I've got my own little sketch layer. I'm going to lock it and add a few frames. And the first thing I'm going to do is draw the base of the head. Now, what do I include in the base of the head when I'm doing a facial rig ready to animate with facial animation later? Well, I always include the ear, the hair. If it doesn't cover too much of the face, I include the hair. If it does, then you need an extra layer for the hair on top to be separately animatable and so that it doesn't interfere. Okay, so in fact, we're going to have to do this so you can see how low that hair is and how it will interrupt the eyebrow. So I'm just going to draw a line like that to cut across. That's going to be hidden later, it doesn't matter. And I'm just drawing the hairline like that, and then the back of the neck. Okay, so this is, believe it or not, basically the base of the head that I need to work with. Okay, so this is what I need for the base of the head. I'm going to select my brush and start to paint in some areas. So I'll paint in shadows under where the hair will be, and add a highlight to the ear, paint that in, and fill this in like so. Then find a hair color I like. I'll go with a dark brown with this fella. Oops. So that's my hair color. So that is my head base. Now I don't need to turn that into a clip. So I will just rename this, call it head base. I'll lock it and wireframe it so I can see underneath it to the sketch. On the next layer, wait, I'm going to skip the layers. I'll rename the layers so you know how I'm going to set it up, because I do have to plan it in my head before I do it. So on the next layer, I'm going to have the mouth. So I'll name this mouth. On the layer above that, I'm going to have the eyes. On the layer above that, I'm going to have the glasses, because this has an extra face prop. So glasses. On the layer, oh actually no, between those layers I need the brows, because the eyebrows need to be able to go underneath the glasses. So brows. But on the very top layer, I need to have the hair. So there we go. That's how I'm going to structure my layers. So let's first of all do the hair, just because it feels like it needs to be done first, because it's part of the head. And I've just done the head base. And while I can leave it to any part of the process, I kind of want to see it in more of a finished context as I go along, which will be helpful by doing a bit earlier. And make sure my line weights look good. Unwireframe the back so I can pinch the colors that I need, and then I'll wireframe it again as I paint those colors in. Paint that and paint that. Oops. There we go. So that's what I need to do. You can see I've just got this little drawing of the hair. I'm going to turn this into a clip and I'll call it PD hair. Move the pivot point up here. So if I need to move it and skew it and do things like that, I can. And you can see how that looks a little more complete. I'll just resize and position it slightly. Looks a bit more natural. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. So I'll wireframe and lock that and the head base, and now we can move on. So now we have the mouth. Now when I say mouth, I tend to include the jaw with the mouth. You can, if you want, draw the head base inclusive of the jaw, but I prefer to remove the jaw and have that part of the mouth so that when I draw and animate the mouth, I include the full jaw in the movement, which adds a lot of dimension to the character's shape. Anyway, so I'm drawing the mouth and then I add the jawline. Now it's got to flow into the head base really well. Now, like I said, if you're a beginner animator in particular, it tends to be a lot more simple to just have the mouth here and not worry about the jaw. But I like to do so. Okay. Let's see what this looks like in the context of it all. Okay, that seems to go well together. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to hit F8 and I'll call it PD mouth. Hit enter. Okay, so that's a graphic. Lock, wireframe everything minus the sketch. Now we have the eyes. Now the eyes are a little bit different here and I kind of need to figure out what I want to do. And I'm thinking I'll just go with normal eyes. I hadn't quite figured that out in the sketch, but I'll keep it consistent. I'm just going to copy and paste this circle because that one turned out really good. No, it's too thin. So I'll just redraw it. Now I tend to like to include the nose with the clip of the eyes. Notice how many attempts of drawing that circle it took. So if you find yourself drawing and redrawing something, don't worry, we all are in the same boat no matter how long you've been doing it. Okay, so I'm going to select this, hit F8, and I'm going to call it eyes. And I'm doing this early before I'm done so I can enter the clip and start adding layers already. So I'm just going to paint in the eyes white, add a new layer, lock the eyes, and add the nose. So I'll wireframe the eyes so I can see better. This is how I want the nose to look. I'll fill that in. Now I can show those eyes again, and I'm quite happy with that. There is one thing I forgot, which is glasses. So sorry, pupils. So I'm going to add a layer. So this character's face has a lot more layers than these two characters because he's got the glasses and he's got the hair on the top. So it's quite good that I chose to do this character in the tutorial so you can see what you would kind of do if you're customizing it a little bit. Anyways, so I'm going to be drawing the pupils now. So to draw the pupils, I end up having it look a little something like, whoops, that, but zoomed in. So it's like a little black dot with just a highlight in the upper corner. And you kind of get used to drawing them. Now, I don't know if because he's a nerd, it might look better because he's got glasses if they're magnified somewhat. But that might make him look too weird. So I'll just keep him like this for now. Hit F8, call it pupils. Oh no, I need to name it PT pupils. PT pupils. And I forgot to do that with the eyes. So I'm just going to rename it here. PT eyes. Okay. So I've got the naming convention going. Lock and wireframe both of those. We're up to the brows. This is quite simple. Well, that was easy. I'm finished with the brows. Hit F8, called it PT brows. And finally, lock wireframe, we have the glasses. So I want to make sure I get the right shape. So I'm going to zoom in once and I'm going to select my brush size and bring it up twice. That way I have the same line thickness, but I get to make sure I'm getting the right structure. Now this is a bit tricky. Something I didn't prepare for is that the glasses are behind the nose but over the eyes. So I need to mess around with this. I'm going to go inside this eyes layer where I've got the nose and delete that layer after having copied it. Going to go back open to the main timeline, and on a layer above glasses called nose, I'm going to hit paste and place the nose. Now this isn't going to move, so I can lock that and wireframe it. But now when I draw the glasses, and let me make my eyes wireframed as well, I can draw them so that they appear behind the nose and above the eyes. So you can see how this face is actually much more complicated than the other ones, which also gives us more room to muck around with the animation. So I can have his glasses slide slightly down his nose if I want. I can do a little bit more because I've given myself that versatility. Now I need to give myself a little bit more room, so I'm going to just pinch that edge down and then relock it and wireframe it. As I continue to draw the glasses, that's just because the bottom of this, the edge of these glasses would have run into the nose there. Quite difficult to get exactly the right shape and size. I'm going to use the perspective trick by selecting that, holding Control Shift and just pinching the corners out, drawing the inside of the rim. Okay, and I'm going to do that perspective trick again by pinching it in at the top and then just skewing it back. I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'm going to do the rims. Let me just erase the edges so it goes out like that. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out to 400%, bring my brush size back down, and I'm going to mess with the colors. So I'm going to take off the onion skin, or the wireframe I should say, on everything. And I'm going to paint the rims of the glasses. Let's see what grey looks like. It's a bit lame. A bit too lame. So let's try a blue. It's a bit more fitting. Maybe too dark. Let's try a light blue. I'm not sure. Desaturated, almost grey blue. Now I'm going to select a gradient and I'm going to color in just like that. And then with both of them selected, I'm going to make the black white, alpha at 20%, this one alpha at 40%, and I'm going to add a spike in the middle and then another spike in the gradient. And that gives it a much more glassy look. In fact, I'm going to select these and make the spikes more prominent. So you almost can't really see behind them, which is good. Makes him look nice and nerdy. And I'm pretty happy with that. So if I unlock these layers and delete the sketch layer on the bottom, I've got everything named and laid out quite well, and I can test this. Oh, I forgot to turn the glasses into a clip, so I'm going to hit F8 and I'll call this glasses, oh sorry, PT glasses. You want to stick to your naming convention. I'll move the pivot to the middle and make sure everything's in order. So the nose is going to be locked and the head base is going to be locked. The jaw, the eyes, the pupils, so you can look up and down and whatnot. The glasses, we have the nose, and then we have the hair, which can move. Okay, so I'll pop out of this. I'll remove the wireframe, and there we go. I've got my character designs completely finished. You can see that they've all got their rigs. I'm going to delete the, oh, actually no, I won't delete the sketch layers. I'll leave them in this file so that you can see them in the reference file. but that's what I would be doing next in preparation for animation. I would delete the sketchy layers and I would begin to animate. So in context, this is what they look like. In the environment, I'll hide the sketch layers. And I think they look pretty neat. They all work well together. They've got a consistent sort of style and their characteristics. I'm gonna leave these clips outside. I'll remove the loader, miscellaneous, and JS intro. Okay. So in the reference file that you download in the link in the description, this is what you will get. You will get the file with the background, you'll get the characters, and on the outside of the characters folder is all the PD things because we put them together today. That, ladies and gentlemen, is it for our tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it, I hope you've learned a bit, and until next time, I will see you later. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoy my videos. You can download the reference files from this tutorial by clicking the link in the description. And remember to share any art, animation, or game you make on Newgrounds.com. Until next time, see you later.